Hey, everyone. It is Sleepy Reader, aka Damien. It's my comic book countdown. These are going to be, I'm going to cover the 9 comics I picked up back on March 9th. And it just took me a long time to get around to reading them all. It's, I almost started to wonder, do I need to take a break from reading comics and just read a novel for a while or something? Or take a break from doing a comic book countdown. But I have my reasons for wanting to continue. But anyway, I'm someone who always is looking for something new to drink. I seem to get more pleasure from sipping than from eating. And I'm always finding something new. And then I'm thinking, I love this. I'm just going to drink this all the time. And then after a while, I get tired of it. And I was like, why was I so in love with that drink? I need to find something else to drink. So, and I think my daughter's the same way, not just with drinking, but just with everything. So it's like a moving target. What will she eat? She's still at 13. I mean, it was much worse when she was younger. But most recently, she just wanted Lipton cup of tea all the time. She would have it for breakfast. It would help her get to school on time. Maybe it was the MSG. I don't know. Is there MSG in this? Anyway, and she would want it for lunch, and she would want it for dinner and for snacks. And we kept running out. There's only 4 packets per box. It would seem like you have a lot, and then bam, they'd be gone. So I bought a whole bunch, and suddenly she says it doesn't taste right anymore, and she doesn't want it anymore at all. So we've got all these boxes. This is only a small number of the or no, we have about 5 boxes at the moment. And I remember when she was a little kid and like maybe 4 or 5, for a year and a half, she would only drink orange juice. And she was living off of orange juice. And it was kind of driving us crazy, but we couldn't convince her to drink much of anything else. I think we would water down her orange juice so she wouldn't get too much sugar all at once. And then suddenly she lost interest in orange juice and she's never ever drunk an orange juice again. Now that pattern's nothing like mine. I can circle back to things. But there's nothing like that first falling in love with something, I think, compared to later on. And then you keep looking to replicate it. So I don't know what that says about me. Maybe it's Freudian. Maybe it's something else. I want a little more oat milk in there. But another thing is, I don't know. All the comics I read this week were good, but some of them just, I would read them and then I'd sort of stop for a while. So I've got 9 comics here. And in at number 9 is We Live Black. I loved the original We Live series. Now, and at the end when there was sort of they flipped the switch and totally surprised you. Spoilers if you haven't read We Live Here. Just skip ahead a few seconds, or 10 seconds, 15 seconds. When they flipped the switch and said, "Oh, this is going to be these are all going to become superheroes," actually, at first I thought that was clever, and then I was talking with people, and a number of people I know who really like the series were disappointed with that, and they proved to be completely right. From my point of view, some people might love this comic. It just wasn't what I wanted from We Live. And I've just had too many superhero comics, too many kaiju comics. So I'm listing We Live Black at the bottom and We Live White at number 8. They're not too different. It's very clever the way they fit together. At the back of each of them, they say the story's continued in We Live number 2 and We Live Black or We Live White, depending on which one it is. So it's a really cool experiment. There's some amazing moments in the art. It's kind of superheroes versus kaiju of a sort, or nature gone wild. But it seems to me to come down to kind of a kaiju fighting kind of thing, still with the post-apocalyptic theme. They've jumped ahead like 6 years, and I think that didn't help me much because suddenly all the stuff I'd built up emotionally and connecting with the characters and such, and the tension and feeling about the world that I had from the first series dissipated a little bit. There was a part of me that was like, if I were in the mood for, getting a whole new world full of cool superheroes, I would have a lot more patience with this. This asked for a little bit too much patience from me to wait for the story to really all click together. And I just decided it's just not the flavor I want. So sadly, I told my comic shop to drop it. Really nice packages. Yes, a higher price. And you're paying to get these two together without any discount would be $10. But they're really nice comics. And there's, like I said, there's some really stunning visual moments. There are moments where it's weird. Why do they, especially because I think the line artist is the colorist. I'm trying to find a certain page, but there's stuff where they blur things out. And I don't know if that's the colorist's insecurity or, desire for special effects on top of special effects. So these are really fun pages. In a way, in a good way, but this reminds me of some of the visual fireworks of those early 90s artists coming out of Marvel and going over to Image. It's not exactly the same, but I had a bit of a vibe of that, and the excitement that some people must have felt, and I felt just a teeny bit because I was older, when a whole bunch of new superheroes, very flashy, exciting superheroes, were exploding on the scene. Maybe kind of how I felt when I was a kid when Atlas Comics came out, even though that wasn't nearly as spectacular. I do think, like, if I were a lot younger, if I were a teenager, this would really be the comic for me. So just not the right place, right time. Ooh, that's kind of a nice Kirby Apocalypse kind of look there. If they ever run out, if this fails, maybe DC should hire them to do a New Gods book. That would be pretty hot. Let's see, where's my drink? The other aspect of this week in terms of like doing a countdown is I really had a hard time placing these things, and I liked them all. I just didn't like. I appreciated We Live for a superhero comic, but I just didn't want it to be a superhero comic. In at number 7 is King of Spies. I've enjoyed reading this, and there's some spectacular art moments from Matteo Scalera, although I feel like I've seen even better from him in other places. And it's a fun concept, but its only twist is its ultraviolence. It's once you set the plot into motion, it just is what it is. And that was fine. I enjoyed it. But I can't say I enjoyed it more than the other comics in my stack. I was really looking forward to Kill Lock, and I'm not counting this out, although I'm putting it, in the bottom half of this week. I'm putting it at number 6. I really love the first volume of Kill Lock. It was a complete story in and of itself. So this is a sequel in the true sense of the word, not a continuation of the story. You don't need to read this if you enjoyed the first one. The first one started off, very basic, and then expanded our view outwards and outwards throughout this sort of galaxy or sector of a galaxy or what have you. Probably a whole galaxy of civilized, of a sort, robots with different factions and types and planets and such. And this one starts you with kind of a scattered, more wider view of a bunch of different things that you're not quite sure what they are, and presumably they will come together. So it's quite possible that this Kill Lock, the Artisan Wraith, as it continues, will go up much higher in my enjoyment. But it was kind of hard work, and it was like, okay, there's a dangling piece. I'm just going to have to be patient and wait to see what that means, and that kind of thing. These two basic characters who are either assassins or what they call themselves problem solvers are interesting and intriguing, and we do eventually learn something about them in the course of this issue that that might have been, in a sense, more helpful to have learned earlier in the issue to care about them a little more. But anyway, I'm looking forward to the bigger picture. This was one of the comics where I say to myself, maybe it's not so smart to be collecting individual issues. Although, as I've said many times, getting this variety of stories, maybe like getting a variety of drinks, getting this variety of stories every week is sort of one of my pleasures of traditional serial comic book collecting. But there's definitely a push and pull there with the way these stories are written. A really good comic to read serially, and I put it at number 5. I'm a bit surprised. This was one where I struggled, where to put it. Is Evil Ernie number 4. I read issue 3. I guess I should go back and get it to issues 2 and 1. I think they're still lurking about in some of my comic book shops. But I had a perfectly good time. It's a much lighter book than any of these other ones that I've ranked it above. It's a very, very light, silly, fun book. I almost ranked it even higher. I just had a good time. Maybe I just wasn't in the mood for something really dense in a way, which might be ironic in some of my complaints in some of the higher books, or some of my caveats in the higher books. The art was not bad. It did its job. It was what it needed to be. As you can see, the coloring was kind of heavy-handed. The story is by Scott Lobdell, who I've often not liked, and then every once in a while thought he was doing a really good job. He does what's needed here. I didn't even notice who the writer was in the first issue that I read, in issue 3. I wasn't paying attention. I just was enjoying the story. There's something a little bit on the generic side, maybe, of this. I don't know. That might not be fair. But I don't know. It just has this fun energy. I hear I think just from Chaos and Comics that the earlier Evil Ernies were even better, so maybe I should seek those out when I'm in the mood. I love this cover homage to the famous picture of a dog pulling down the pants of a little boy by, why do I always forget his name? One of the great American illustrators, Norman Rockwell. This is a fun homage to Norman Rockwell, somewhere where you wouldn't expect it. Done very well by Arthur Sudam. I know people have found him to be a difficult person at conventions, but anyway, he's still a good artist when he's does some work. I don't see him that often. So I kind of wrestled, should Evil Ernie have been number 4? But I put Little Monsters at number 4. I loved the black and white, or mostly black and white artwork by Dustin Nguyen. Sorry, Dustin. And the script by Jeff Lemire was perfectly fine. To me, this was an example of kind of like, I've talked with people about how if the story is utterly awful, no matter how great the art is, it can't rescue it. But there is that middle ground where the story is decent and the art can raise it up to feeling like something much more important than it would have been with a different art. And that's sort of how I feel here. This is a fun enough so far. I mean, we'll see where it goes. Jeff Lemire can surprise me sometimes, and other times he can let me down. It's a fun enough sort of wistful story about kid vampires in a abandoned apocalyptic landscape. They've been here for years. And Nguyen does wonderful inky drawings, and then he lays over a kind of faux Ben-Day dots. I assume they're faux. I don't think he cut them out and glued them on the way they would have in the old days. But he uses that as his gray tone rather than actually painting with a wash. I'm assuming he probably did it digitally and had various brushes that have the dots coming out of the, digital brushes with the dots coming out. But I thought he did it very effectively. And so I'm really enjoying this. I hope I put it on my pull list. it's been comics have been harder and harder to get a hold of. If you don't put them on your pull list, they may just disappear. Even when I'm drawing from 3 different comic book shops, although that does help, having 3 different comic book shops. So I'm looking forward to more of this. I like Dustin's art when it's painted watercolor kind of stuff, but I think I like it even better, quite a bit better, in this black and white version. I just really like that. Kind of reminds me, there's a little bit of Will Eisner in Nguyen's art, and it kind of reminds me of how I enjoy the Will Eisner's The Spirit in black and white way more than I do in color. Next up, I've got number 3, Norse Mythology. This is always, month after month, a strong book. Confusing because this is Norse Mythology Volume 3. It doesn't say that anywhere on the cover. It's issue number 2. As usual, it begins with a story that's actually continued from the last issue. If you just picked this up, you'd be like, what the heck is going on? There isn't even a title given for it, well, except on the credits page there. Still annoying that Dark Horse, like Marvel, has these terrible flimsy covers. But other than that, so the art by David Rubin on Himmer's fishing expedition was really good. Kind of dark-ish coloring, but very cool coloring. And then, so I'm guessing digitally this coloring by David Rubin will look really good. And then a more sort of reasonable on the printed page coloring for the art by Colleen Doran on the story of Balder, which is a very familiar story to me, but still is brought to life in such a good way that that I really enjoyed it. And I feel like Colleen Doran's trying something a little different in her art than I've seen in the past, although, I haven't followed her every step through her career. I just sort of, every once in a while, she seems to pop up into view for me. But she's an excellent choice here. I think her art style fits well with the layouts that were done by P. Craig Russell. And also she's a good artistic fit with the Neil Gaiman too. So I would love lots of stories by her, but it just kind of ends. It doesn't say, to be continued, but this is just part of the story of Balder. So again, I guess they don't care at all about people buying single issues and just making things clear to them. It's all about just putting it out in the floppy and then selling it in a trade and just scraping whatever money you can from us floppy buyers, but still not stopping me from getting it. I'm just sort of like, couldn't you just put a teeny bit more effort in here to make it clear to floppy buyers what they're getting? Say, for instance, here it could say Ymr's Fishing Expedition Part 2 and Death of Balder Part 1 or something. Or find a way for at least the floppy version to reiterate the title of the story at the top, even though you're in the middle of the story, and to say to be continued at the end for the rest of the story by the next issue or something. I mean, you literally are leaving money on the table, I think, by not taking these simple steps to encourage people to buy the floppies. Shame on you, Dark Horse. I was going to put this comic at number 1, and then at the last minute, I got a hold of the comic that I did put at number 1. My head says the very best comic I read this week. My sort of critical self says it was New Masters. It's chapter 2, basically, in what looks to be like a major sci-fi epic with a non-Western point of view. The point of view comes from Nigeria, and we have a solar system with various civilizations. I'm unclear, and Earth is kind of at the bottom rung, and there's been all kinds of disasters. I'm unclear if we're supposed to think that, like the Jovians, who I'm beginning to think live on the moons of Jupiter, not on Jupiter itself, because to make themselves feel at home when they come to Earth, they project Jupiter into the sky. So if they lived on the moons, they would be seeing a giant Jupiter in their sky all the time where they live. So maybe it makes them feel better to see that, or I don't know what. But so are the people from, and maybe we'll never know, but I always ask myself these sci-fi questions. Are the people from the moons of Jupiter, are they human? Did they originate on Earth, or did different civilizations and species originate on different planets in this version of the solar system? There are, suspicions of some kind of life under the ice on various moons of various planets, because there's some warm oceans under there, warmed by the cores of the moons. Anyway, this continues with its nice world building. We learn that our heroine, whose name kind of doesn't stick in my head, her father is a Nigerian from Earth, and her mother is Jovian from Jupiter, and that's what she looks like. So they have these kind of, I think, scars or markings around their mouth, which reminds me that I know that some tribes in Nigeria, the Yoruba, I think, but I'm not positive, have or used to have ritual scarring to identify themselves on their cheeks. So I don't know if that's a reference to that. But it's really cool art. It's, again, for me, I'm always wanting coloring to be a little lighter. It's kind of dark coloring, but it's very cool and, I don't know, lively, interesting coloring. There's always stuff going on in the color. There is a kind of teaser image. I wish more of the coloring was on this level in terms of its brightness and contrast. But again, I'm just always picking on coloring, aren't I? But anyway, we learn more about all our characters and and a little more about the political situation of the world that we're in, the city that we're in Nigeria. And so this is progressing really nicely. It could become a brilliant sci-fi story. Of course, it could just go off the rails. It's kind of funny, like if I were reading Dune, if I were to review it every chapter or two, that would be like reviewing a comic book like this, to try to judge, say I had just read chapter 1 of Dune, and then try to tell people, oh, you should read Dune or you shouldn't. So I don't know. But I'm really hopeful for this, and I get excited over a really good science fiction story that is not like every other science fiction story I've read. I mean, certainly there's familiarity in terms of prose science fiction that I've read that helps me kind of piece together what the situation might be. And there are notes at the end of each issue which also help a little bit. So yeah, this is the comic that I'm probably most excited about. That's new to me. Like I'm always excited about Usagi Yojimbo, but after reading it now for maybe 2.5 years, it feels like an old hat a bit. But New Masters seems really good, and I know that there's at least now 2 comics from Africans coming out from Image, this and Monkey Meat. I was not a fan of Monkey Meat, but I'm wondering if there's more African comics coming our way. That would be really cool. And speaking about the international, but the really familiar, I loved the first issue of Hour of the Dragon. So it's probably not as important a comic as New Masters might be, but it's an adaptation of one of my favorite Conan stories. It's the only novel about Conan that Robert E. Howard ever wrote, called The Hour of the Dragon. But when they published it in paperbacks, they called it Conan the Conqueror. I think to keep up every book was called Conan the something, Conan the Barbarian, Conan the Buccaneer, what have you. So they published the pulp novel. It was serialized in a pulp and then put out in a book many years after his death as Conan the Conqueror. And I read this one over and over and over as a kid. It evoked so much in my head. And this one, I went in really low expectations because I have not been that thrilled by most of the Sumerians, just because I don't know, the vision of the world and of Conan often seemed half baked to me. But this artist, who's his name? It's not on the cover. The name of the artist should be in big letters on the cover because he is important. Valentin Setcher. The writer, the one with the easy job, because it was already written by Robert E. Howard, is Julian Blondell, and I'm sure it's not a 100% easy job, but the big lifting is this painted art or seemingly painted art from Setcher. I don't know how to pronounce his name, Valentin Setcher. It's really rich. My first reaction was reading this. I'm always wanting something more. Was, wow, this is so good. I want it bigger. I know in Europe it must have been considerably bigger, and these are such detailed panels that you really want to take them in. And at first glance, it kind of blurs all together, and you have to slow yourself down and look closely at each panel to realize how much cool stuff Setcher is putting in there. And so again, because I have such high expectations, I loved it and I wanted more, and I'm worried that they're going to do too short of an adaptation of it. It's about a 220-page novel, and there was stuff that they skipped over quickly. I think it might be because they wanted to get to a certain kind of cliffhanger by the end of this issue. I'm not sure, because these originally came out as albums, so I don't know if they were always thinking about a serialization also. But it does end, sort of with a cliffhanger. But it feels like I really wanted them to take a little more time with setting up like all the people who were overthrowing Conan, because that's the basic plot. Is a group of conspirators awaken an ancient evil wizard from Acheron, who like 4,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago ruled a large part of the continent with his sort of evil, brutal magic. And it would have been nice if they had time to paint a page or two of, because I remember from the story, the visions of the horror of Acheron was almost Lovecraftian at its level of horror. And it would be nice to have had time to envision that and to kind of spend a little more time getting to know the different conspirators, and also maybe a little more time with the evil wizard. Let's see, there's the evil wizard there. And he should be, in my mind, just some vague semblance of humanity left, because he's so seeped in kind of this semi-Lovecraftian evil magic that allowed him to rule and be sort of immortal till his enemies finally found a way to just put him to sleep because they couldn't kill him. Anyway, I'm complaining while loving it, but yeah, and I hope that I hope that I'm wrong and it's not just going to be 3 issues or 4 issues. In the Marvel Comics version of it, they did it across numerous giant-size Conans, which were extra long comics, and then in 2 issues, 2 extra long stories in issues of Savage Sword of Conan. So the total of it was a little over 200 pages of comics in the Marvel Comics version. And it was a bit scattershot because of the amount of time between Marvel, the Savage Sword of Conan, the Giant-Sized Conan, I think, was quarterly, and then it took a while after when they couldn't finish it because it was such a long story, they couldn't finish it in the Conan, in the Giant-Sized Conan. They then switched over, to the black and white Savage Sword of Conan with a different artist, several different artists. There's some of it. So I think there was a Gil Kane part, but with a different inker that gave it a very different style. And then it was finished out by John Buscema. Anyway, it's a story where you want to add in the richness and take your time, I think, personally. I know that it must have, as a kid, it must have particularly filled my head with visions of worlds that never existed. And I love that feeling. And I think that's what has attracted to me with Conan over the years, not just the sort of barbarian versus civilization, but that sort of deep time, slightly Lovecraftian layers of bizarre prehistory history, which was particularly captured in parts of Conan the Conqueror. It also had a little bit of romance, I think. So anyway, that was all very fun to read those. Now that I've talked about them, but it took me like 10 days to read those 9 comics. So I better read some more before I do a live comic chat, probably just with Terrence Comic Crack on Sunday on my channel, probably around 12:30 or 1. I'm thinking my West Coast time, Pacific time. So that would be about 3 o'clock East Coast time, 4 o'clock East Coast time, 3:30, 4 o'clock East Coast time, and who knows what time in Europe. Maybe by some Ross is busy. Maybe by some miracle she'll show up, although I don't think so. Or maybe we'll find some other guest to appear. But anyway, even if not, we'll have fun talking comics. So I will talk to all of you again very soon. Normally, I want Amazon to ship things in together in boxes rather than lots of separate packages, but this is 2 large books and they pack them in a very odd way. We'll see what it looks like on the inside when I open it up with these.